The little girl had never called anyone daddy before. Not her mother's friends. Not the neighbors who sometimes brought her toys. Not even the man whose photograph still sat inside an old drawer, hidden beneath folded clothes and memories her mother was trying desperately to forget. But that sunny Saturday afternoon, in the middle of a crowded family restaurant, the toddler looked directly at a complete stranger, stretched out her tiny arms, and said the one word that made her mother's entire world stop. Daddy. The fork slipped from the woman's hand. For several seconds, nobody at the table moved. The restaurant continued around them, filled with the soft clatter of plates, children laughing, sunlight pouring through wide windows, and the distant sound of traffic outside. But for Mara Ellison, everything suddenly became silent. She stared at her 3-year-old daughter, Ivy, who was smiling at the man sitting across from them as if she had known him forever. The man looked equally stunned. His name was Callan Rhodes, and until that moment, he had been nothing more than a stranger pretending to be Mara's date. A joke. A favor. A harmless afternoon that was supposed to last 2 hours. Neither of them knew that one innocent word from a child was about to change all 3 of their lives. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give people a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub. Because sometimes the people who enter our lives by accident are the very people who help us find our way home. That morning had started with Mara receiving a message from her younger sister, Sienna, that she was tired of watching Mara hide from life. For nearly 3 years, Mara had been raising Ivy alone. She worked during the day at a small flower shop, rushed home in the evenings, prepared dinner, helped Ivy with her toys, and fell asleep exhausted after putting her daughter to bed. She had learned how to repair broken drawers, carry heavy grocery bags, change light bulbs, and comfort a crying child while silently crying herself. She had become both mother and father without ever asking for the responsibility. Ivy's biological father had left before she was born. He had promised he would come back. Then he stopped answering messages. Eventually, Mara stopped waiting. She had also stopped dating. Every time someone showed interest, she found a reason to disappear. She was afraid of introducing Ivy to someone who might eventually disappear too. She could survive another heartbreak, but she could not bear watching her daughter experience one. Sienna knew this. So she had arranged what she called a fake date. Callan was a friend of Sienna's, a quiet man who worked as a landscape designer and spent most of his free time helping his widowed mother with her garden. He was kind, patient, and, according to Sienna, completely harmless. Mara had refused at first. Then Sienna had challenged her, saying that one afternoon could not possibly destroy her life. So Mara agreed. The plan was simple. Callan would meet Mara and Ivy for lunch, pretend to be her date, and afterward Mara could laugh about the ridiculous experience and return to her normal life. But when Callan arrived, something unexpected happened. He did not look at Mara the way other men had. He did not stare at her as if her motherhood were an inconvenience. Instead, he crouched down to Ivy's height and complimented the tiny yellow flower clipped into her hair. Ivy immediately smiled. Mara noticed. She tried not to. Throughout lunch, Callan never forced conversation. He simply listened. When Ivy dropped her spoon, he picked it up without making a fuss. When she became restless, he showed her how to fold a napkin into a little bird. When Mara apologized for her daughter making a mess, Callan simply smiled and told her that children were supposed to make messes. For the first time in years, Mara felt relaxed around a man. And that frightened her more than anything. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ivy reached toward Callan and called him Daddy. Mara quickly apologized, embarrassed and horrified, explaining that Ivy had barely spoken about her biological father and sometimes confused affectionate men with family figures. But Callan did not laugh. He did not look uncomfortable. He simply looked at Ivy with a strange tenderness in his eyes. He told Mara that children sometimes said things adults were too afraid to say. Those words stayed with her. After lunch, Callan walked them to the parking lot beneath the bright afternoon sun. Ivy held his finger the entire way. Mara gently tried to take her daughter's hand, but Ivy refused. She wanted Callan. Mara felt something crack open inside her. She knew it was dangerous. Not because Callan had done anything wrong, but because he had done everything right. Over the following weeks, Mara tried to convince herself that the lunch had been meaningless. Then Callan appeared at the flower shop one afternoon carrying a small wooden planter he had made for Ivy. He said it was a gift. Mara almost refused it. But Ivy was standing beside her, staring at the little planter with enormous excitement. So Mara accepted. Callan began visiting occasionally, never forcing himself into their lives. Sometimes he brought flowers. Sometimes he helped Mara carry boxes. Sometimes he simply sat in the shop while Ivy colored pictures nearby. He never acted like a hero. That was what made him different. He did not try to rescue Mara. He simply stayed. And Mara slowly discovered how powerful staying could be. One bright afternoon, she watched Callan kneeling in the backyard while Ivy helped him plant tiny purple flowers. Ivy got dirt all over her dress. Callan laughed. Mara stood by the kitchen window watching them. For a moment, the scene looked like a family. A real one. And that frightened her. That evening, Mara told Callan that they needed to stop. She explained that she could not let Ivy become attached to him. Callan listened quietly. He did not argue. He did not beg. He simply told Mara that he understood. Then he walked away. The next few days felt strangely empty. Ivy kept asking where he was. Mara kept saying he was busy. But children noticed more than adults realized. One afternoon, Ivy sat beside Mara on the couch and asked whether Callan had forgotten them. Mara's heart broke. She hugged her daughter tightly and promised that nobody had forgotten her. But she could not promise anything else. Then, 3 days later, Mara received a phone call from the hospital. Ivy had collapsed at preschool. By the time Mara arrived, her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely open the car door. Doctors rushed Ivy into a room for tests. Mara sat alone beneath the harsh hospital lights, staring at the floor, blaming herself for every moment she had ever been distracted, every meal she had served too late, every night she had been too tired to read one more bedtime story. Then she realized something terrifying. She wanted Callan there. Not because she needed someone to fix the situation. She simply wanted someone beside her who would understand why she was afraid. Her hand trembled as she opened her phone. She stared at Callan's name for almost a minute before calling. He answered immediately. Mara could barely speak. Within 20 minutes, Callan was sitting beside her in the hospital corridor. He did not ask questions. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He simply sat beside her and held her trembling hand. Hours later, the doctor finally came out. Ivy was going to be okay. She had suffered a severe fever and dehydration, but there was no lasting danger. Mara burst into tears. Callan stayed beside her. That night, as Ivy slept peacefully in the hospital bed, Mara finally admitted what she had been afraid to say. She told Callan that she had spent years believing love meant giving someone the power to hurt you. Callan told her that maybe love was also giving someone the chance to prove they would not. Mara looked at him through tear-filled eyes. She realized that Callan had never demanded a place in their lives. He had earned one quietly. Not with promises. With consistency. With patience. With kindness. Months passed. Their relationship grew slowly, carefully, without rushing into anything. Callan became part of Ivy's world, but Mara never forced Ivy to call him anything. One sunny afternoon, they visited the same restaurant where the entire story had begun. The same windows. The same bright tables. The same warm afternoon light. Ivy was coloring beside them while Mara and Callan talked. Suddenly Ivy looked up. She smiled. Then she ran toward Callan and wrapped both arms around his legs. Mara watched, holding her breath. This time Ivy did not say Daddy. She simply said Callan's name. And somehow, that made Mara cry even harder. Because the first time Ivy had called him Daddy, it had been innocent. A mistake. A word borrowed from a dream. But now, months later, Ivy knew exactly who Callan was. He was the man who showed up. The man who stayed. The man who remembered her favorite flowers. The man who never made her feel like she was a burden. The man who sat beside her mother when she was scared. The man who had slowly become family without ever demanding the title. Callan looked at Mara. Mara smiled through her tears. And in that moment, she understood something she had spent years learning the hard way. Sometimes life does not give us the family we expected. Sometimes it gives us something completely different. Something unexpected. Something imperfect. Something that begins as a joke and becomes the most honest thing we have ever known. The fake date had been supposed to last 2 hours. Instead, it gave Mara a second chance at love. It gave Ivy someone who chose to stay. And it taught 3 people that family is not always created by blood. Sometimes family is created by the person who keeps showing up when everyone else has left. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that good people still exist, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub for more emotional stories about love, hope, kindness, and second chances. And before we say goodbye, I want you to leave one special comment below. Kindness can become family. Write those words if you believe that one small act of kindness can change an entire life. Because somewhere in the world, there may be a Mara who has stopped believing in love, an Ivy waiting for someone to stay, or a Callan quietly proving that real love is not about making promises. It is about keeping them. And sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with something we never intended to become real.